Hey, deserving listeners, it's time to continue watching the Johnny Depp Amber Heard trial. Let's watch.
She would almost try to instigate him.
And when you say she, you're referring to Miss Heard. Did you ever witness that personally?
Yes.
Okay, so to catch you up, we are hearing recorded testimony from Johnny Depp's nurse, registered nurse, who helped him with addiction. And she was a nurse that I think only worked for Johnny Depp for a period of time. We are hearing now that she's saying that she observed their relationship quite often because I'm guessing that most of the time that she was at work, she didn't have anything to do. And it sounds like Johnny Depp and her were quite close. Her name is Debbie Lloyd. She is now saying that she observed Amber Heard trying to instigate fights with Johnny Depp several times. So the other thing that I didn't show a reaction to was one of Johnny Depp's friends named Gina something testified and was talking about how Johnny Depp was a great guy and that when he used alcohol he wouldn't get violent and that Amber Heard didn't seem to wear a lot of makeup. So it seemed to be another friend of Johnny Depp's that was pulled into court to try to dismantle Amber Heard's account of things, including covering up the bruises. And then she was swiftly escorted out of court because I read on the internet, according to news reports, that Gina, the witness, had been watching the court hearing from outside of the court. I didn't know this because I'm not a legal expert, which is clear from my various reactions. By the way, a number of very expert lawyers in trial legal stuff have been emailing me detailed descriptions of various different things, like whether or not you can have notes on the stand and what hearsay means. And I do appreciate all that. It helps me. So hopefully I'm a little bit more educated on it. But I will tell you that a lot of the emails that I got from people, from lawyers, they kind of contradicted each other at times. But from what I understand from the news reports, Gina was found by Amber Heard's legal team. I think they saw on the internet somehow, maybe a post or a tweet by Gina that indicated she was watching the trial prior to giving her testimony, which apparently is a big no-no. And so they approached the bench, they told the judge, and the judge told her to leave, and the judge instructed the jury to disregard all of that testimony. I don't know if the testimony was all that strong anyway, so I don't know if Johnny Depp's team is really all that harmed by that. Plus, how do you tell the jury to forget everything that they heard? Maybe they have that ability, or they really are able to section off certain things. But anyway, so then we heard from Johnny Depp's physician who specialized in addiction, and he was talking about his notes, and it was a long time ago, so he doesn't really remember. There were some details in there about how much drug use he was using. He was using benzodiazepines, opiates, marijuana, alcohol, and stimulants like Adderall or Ritalin, or one of the common medications for ADHD. And he was prescribed benzodiazepines and he was prescribed stimulants, psychostimulants, but it sounded like he was not prescribed opiates, or he was abusing the prescription or something. And it sounded like his main addiction or problem was with the opiates. So, and yeah, I've treated people who have opiate addiction. It's a rough addiction in that, one, if you aren't Johnny Depp and you can't afford the hundreds of... So what happens in the beginning is... So let me tell you a common story. I guess I haven't had a chance to really talk about this. I used to work at a chemical dependency agency, and my role there was a psychologist and a therapist and a family therapist, a couple therapists, an evaluator. I would do evaluations, but I learned firsthand, and of course I had treated a lot of people with addictions before and had various different moments in other venues where I would help out with the chemical dependency department. But to work at an agency that was solely dedicated to chemical dependency and to work closely with the team and to go to to group therapy, it was, I wasn't just a standalone clinician. I was with every client that came in the door, regardless of what addiction it was, there's a whole team of people, and I provided the psychology and the psychotherapy component, or supervised someone. Anyway, I learned the typical stories of opiate addiction because it's really prevalent. In Seattle, we have a particular problem with it, but a common path is someone will have some sort of trauma growing up, and they have emotional regulation that is difficult for them, and they have intense emotions, and they might self-medicate in other ways. They might even go to therapy, but it's hard for them to get through the day without having significant amounts of pain and anxiety and anger and just unbridled emotion. They might be able to hold it together to keep a job. They might even be able to be an actor in movies, but inside they're not doing well. They go to a physician and they are prescribed an opiate. Say they have their wisdom teeth pulled, or they have pain in their joints or something, and they take an opiate, a painkiller, and maybe they are in particular pain that day, so they take a little bit more, then the physician says, if you need to take 2 or 3, go ahead and do that. And so they get a pretty good dose, and for the very first time, they feel okay. For the very first time in their life, they no longer feel that constant nagging pain and anxiety that they have felt ever since they could remember. And they're like, wait, what? Is this what everyone else is feeling? Because it looks like everyone else is fine, and I feel like I feel that way now. It's like, that feeling when your ear is filled with water and it finally opens up? Imagine having that your entire life, and then one day it just goes, and suddenly you can hear. Or an experience that I had growing up was my eyesight was going bad, and I was, squinting, sitting in the back row of, in 4th grade. And I actually, because I hated sitting in the front because I'm kind of shy, and so I would sit in the very back row. I would always choose to do that. And I had a friend, Melinda, I would turn to her and be like, what does the blackboard say? Because there's a lot of blackboard stuff in the 70s. But anyway, so when I finally got contacts, I went straight to contact lenses because everyone in my family had already gone down the road of glasses and then going to contacts. So I went straight to contacts, and I remember looking out the window and seeing every individual leaf on the trees. And I just thought it was a whole new world. It opened up to me, and it was glorious. Suddenly I could see things. It's just the world open. There's all those cute videos that people will post of a toddler, an infant that is given those prescription glasses for toddlers that kind of wrap around the head, and they're kind of like, what are you putting on my face? And then they look through and they're like, oh, it's just the glory and the pleasure and the wonderfulness. Like, wait, what? I can see now? That's what it can be like for people when they first take an opiate. And they can relax, and they can get work done. They can get through the day. They don't have to drink at night, a 6-pack to just fall asleep. They just feel normal. And that's what often this is like with opiate addiction. Because as a painkiller, not only does it reduce typically one's physical pain, as we might call it, but it also takes away our emotional pain. Our emotional pain and our physical pain in the brain are essentially the same thing. We tend to think of them differently. Like if someone breaks up with you, it's like, oh, my heart is broken. But if you fall down the stairs and break your arm, that's a completely different thing. In the brain, it's essentially the same thing. And so when you have the mechanism to reduce a physical pain, your emotional pain will also be attenuated, if not eliminated as well. Typically, not always, but typically. So when that happens, then you have a huge motivation to continue to take opiates well beyond your prescription, right? And this was more prevalent in the past when physicians would just hand out opiates all the time. In fact, I had a client who was struggling with opiate addiction and recovery, and she hurt her foot, maybe broke it, and went to the hospital, and she was getting treated. And as she was recovering, a physician came around and said, here's some opiates that you can take. And her thing was Percocet. Her thing was opiate addiction. And she said, no, I can't, she didn't want to admit because she was too ashamed or too shy to say, no, I'm an addict. You can't give me those pills. But she said something to the effect of, no, I don't want those. She refused them. I don't need them. I don't want them. And when she's telling me the story, I'm like, oh, good for you. Good for you. Good for you. And then a few minutes later, another physician comes by and says, hey, you didn't get any, here's some opiates, this kind of thing, or a prescription or something. And she had to refuse again. And I'm thinking, why are they not taking no for an answer? And then they asked her again. Now, of course, if she were further down recovery, she would absolutely announce right from the beginning, don't give me any opiates, anyone. I have a problem. And I'm sure the physicians, I hope, would have followed that direction. Certainly now, I think they would, because there's more education around that. But anyway, So the person takes the opiates and now they're feeling great about it and they start to seek more of it. Maybe they even go to their physician at first and say, oh, I'm still in pain, even though they're not really. And they start getting more. And then eventually the physicians detects like, well, maybe we should start transitioning to aspirin or Tylenol or something because, we're not supposed to give out this many opiates. At some point, you're just going to have to figure out other methods. And the patient might get really upset about that or might invent another pain, might go to another physician. You can see how what we call, med seeking can be like. Because pain is, you report it, right? You don't have to show evidence of it to get some physicians to prescribe opiates to you. Again, I believe it's more regulated now because so many people have died. But anyway, and then because you're not Johnny Depp, eventually you run out of money because your tolerance goes up, and thus you need dozens of pills a day. Where one pill you would have been flying high in the beginning, when you had no tolerance for the opiate. By the time you're months into it, you need several pills just to get to a point where you're not feeling the withdrawal symptoms, because the withdrawal symptoms to opiate addiction is intense and horrible. So the individual starts to run out of money, and they hear on the streets, because they're maybe even getting pills from illegal sources at this point, that there's a thing called heroin and other drugs of that sort where it's very cheap and you can ingest it various different ways. And this is when IV drug use begins, and this is when you can get a straight shot to the brain through a vein. You don't have to take it through orally and wait for it to happen. You can inject this, substance right into your vein. It goes straight to your brain. You have this massive spike in the effect and euphoria, but it doesn't last very long. You gotta get your fix sooner, because whereas a slow acting pill might last you throughout the day, depending on how the pill is designed or intended. And now with heroin, you're having these spikes throughout the day, so you've got to continually get more and more of it and use more and more of it. And now you're exposing yourself to HIV and hepatitis and other kinds of problems. And you are now maybe having experiences where you spike too hard, because most of the opiate addicts, heroin addicts that I worked with, they're just trying to get through the day, meaning that they're not necessarily looking for a high. They're just trying to function. Maybe occasionally on the weekends they'll take a double dose or something to super chill out, but usually they're just trying to go to work. They're just trying to function. They're just trying to make do. And so they will try to take their doses in such a way that will just get them through the day. And they will occasionally accidentally use too much, and they will pass out, or they'll have that look that you'll see where people are, extremely sleepy, or their heart will stop, their breathing will stop, and they'll die. This is, heroin overdose is a huge problem. And we've seen many famous people die from this process. And the general public often thinks these individuals are these degenerates or something. And I hope from my story that I told you that, there's nothing bad about these individuals. There's nothing evil about them. These individuals were just trying to get through life. Again, if we go back in time before they took their first opiate, they were trying. They were going to therapy maybe. They were trying to do meditation and mindfulness. They were exercising, they're trying to help themselves. They're reading self-help books, but this emotional pain is coming up. And then again, they take that opiate and boom, it's like, well, this is the path. And then of course the addiction kicks in, and then the pattern and the habit progresses over time. And a couple years later, 5 years later, you're, completely in the throes of a typical heroin addiction. And it's really tragic. And of course, the solution is we need more services for people and more available trauma specialists along these lines early before people take their first opiate, that kind of thing. We also need to be very careful about prescribing opiates. And I believe people are more careful now. But this all brings me back to Johnny Depp, of course. And is that what he was dealing with? Of course, we know that he was abused growing up, and I don't think he ever recovered, or at least not sufficiently. And he maybe had trouble sleeping or something, and with anxiety, so he takes the benzodiazepine. He drinks a lot, because that, the thing about drinking a lot is it will numb you out. But of course, there's all these other problems because you're highly intoxicated. If you drive, these problems, your emotions become potentially even more erratic. But on opiates, it tends to almost universally just cause people to just be super relaxed and chill and just nothing. They just, I'm fine now. And so now, having said that, if you're on a cruising dose, if you will, meaning that you're just using a dose to get you through the day, you won't notice anything about those individuals because they're just getting up to baseline. So I want to say that. But anyway, so for Johnny Depp, it sounds like he was trying to break that habit. He voluntarily, it sounds like, engaged with a physician that specialized in it and with a nurse.
When you say Miss Heard would try to instigate him, what do you mean?
I remember an argument or being in there when he was going from room to room trying to remove himself from a situation, and she would just follow him from room to room and not give him his space.
All right, we are hearing multiple reports of this pattern where he would try to get away, just like he did with his sister when they were young, when they were trying to get away from the mother's abuse, and Amber Heard hounding and chasing and not letting him go. And I'm sure I've talked about this already, but just a brief summary is that when someone has attachment injuries that make them hypervigilant about staying close to their attachment figures and also be extremely afraid of being separated from their attachment figures, in the middle of a fight, their attachment worries are even higher because there's conflict, and then their partner moves away, it can be intolerable to them given their anxiety and their pain and their deep worries of separation, and they might become completely irrational and chase. They might even put hands on and say, "You can't leave me." They might bar them from leaving the room. There's all sorts of things that people do. Of course, that's abusive, potentially illegal, and should never be done. But I don't know if that's what we're seeing, but if I heard that, that would be the first hypothesis I would develop.
At a very high pitch, so I didn't rush in right away or anything. I just kind of stood by the door. He was, speaking with her, and then the voices, the shouting dissipated, and then, there was music playing, and then they started talking. So I kind of just stood by the door briefly, and then I went into another section of the penthouse floor. That could have been perhaps 2012, 2013.
This is Sean Bett, who is Johnny Depp's security guard and has been under his employment for many, many years. I think he's still employed by Johnny Depp. He's a former police officer. He said that Amber Heard, I didn't show this clip, that Amber Heard always started the fights. Okay, that's another person and their account. He's currently employed by Johnny Depp, so, we could imagine there being a little bit of a bias there. But who knows? According to him, that's what's happening. And then he's describing having witnessed their arguments, and maybe we'll get some more specifics here.
There was a couple occasions. There was one occasion in which they had an argument at his West Hollywood address. Johnny told me, just take her downtown to the penthouse so she can relax and cool off. As we were driving downtown, she was crying. This was at the point when the arguing was taking place quite frequently. And I was telling her, I said, Amber, this can't continue. You guys are either going to kill each other or you're going to be in jail. And, with tears and everything, she says, but I love him and I'm not going to lose him. And I says, but you guys can't keep doing this.
Interesting. It's always good to get these other background stories just to kind of flesh out the relationship. And we're getting a fair amount of that. He's saying that there was a fight between Johnny Depp and Amber Heard, and Johnny asked him, the security guard, to take her to another residence of theirs so they could cool down. He's driving away, and Amber Heard is crying, and he's trying to help and says, you got to stop fighting because you're either going to kill each other or something else, or you're going to break up. And then she says, it's hard because I love him so much. All right. And we've seen other indications along these lines as well. By the way, many of you are sending me clips of recorded audio during their fights and different analyses and this sort of thing. And I appreciate it, I do. And I'll take it into consideration. I might even react to it at some point. Yeah, I mean, if you have any other clips that you want me to take a look at, feel free to email me. You want to go to the website, click on the contact button, and you can email me directly from there. Someone sent me an audio, and there was a similar, seemingly sentiment from Amber Heard of, I just love him so much, but he frustrates me and that kind of thing. And so when I hear that, it fits into my conceptualization of people who suffer from preoccupied attachment, maybe disorganized, maybe borderline, hard to say, but definitely preoccupied attachment, because that's a much more broad umbrella that encompasses perhaps a couple billion people on the planet. It's a very common attachment injury and attachment style, or coping style. When you think attachment style, think of a way of coping with attachment distance and threat. And so for people with preoccupied attachment style, when there's a threat to the attachment, either you don't see them very often, they move away from you, or they disapprove of you, or even they're angry at you or abusing you or something. There's an attachment threat there, or you see them looking at someone else, or jealousy or whatever. All the various different threats that we have to our attachments, because we evolved clearly to need attachments to survive and to procreate and whatnot. So when preoccupied individuals have that attachment threat and fear, what they will do is they will resort to a lot of different things. But one of the things that they will resort to is to attack and to chase and to pursue and to put the other person down, to get desperate, to, if being nice doesn't work, or if being nice is really hard because you're in the middle of a fight, then, you'll do anything. You'll yell, you'll scream, you'll punch, you'll scratch, you'll insult, you'll, do all sorts of things. And then when it gets really highly conflictual, it might just be like, okay, there's no way out of this. And then you'll be very distraught after that. You might be crying, and it's all motivated by love. It's strange to think about that if you don't have that attachment style, to think that someone would be motivated by love to be abusive. Why? That doesn't make any sense. But in my experience, the vast majority of perpetrators of abuse of any degree, that's where it comes from. It comes from love. It doesn't make it okay, of course.
There was an incident because, as I said, the arguing progressed over and over as the years continued. He would text me when I was working saying,
Objection, Your Honor. Calls for hearsay.
I overheard her saying to him, he's a fat ass, fuck you, Johnny, and you too, Sean, at one time when she went to throw a water bottle or a plastic cup down the stairs, and it bounced kind of in Johnny's direction, but I ended up getting him, and we, got out of there as soon as.
Wow. Okay. That's specific. He's saying there was a moment where Amber Heard was maybe chasing him. We don't know. He didn't say that, but we could imagine that being the precursor to this. Obviously, the precursor to that is a lot of fighting, verbal fighting. And he's with Sean Bett, the security guard, is with Johnny, probably going, okay, let's go. And then Amber Heard throws something at Johnny Depp and then says, you're a fat old man or something, and also calls the security guard a fat old man. What does that say? Well, it's in line with a lot of other reports of verbal abuse, physical abuse. It's absolutely physical abuse to throw a water bottle, even if it's not going to kill anyone or even hurt someone seriously. I have treated perpetrators who never actually physically or seriously harmed their partner. They might pick up a chair and throw it against the wall. They might break a glass on the floor. They might push a lamp over or slam a door or punch a wall, and all of that is considered abuse in our field because the implication is this is you next, and it's extremely scary.
Did you ever see Ms. Heard throw anything other than a water bottle?
It was a water bottle or a coffee cup. It was something plastic.
Okay, so I think he just said there were multiple moments of her throwing something at him, and water bottle, plastic, coffee cups. Okay, is that what he's saying, or was or was there only one incident and he doesn't remember what it was exactly?
Other than a water bottle or a plastic cup, did you ever see Ms. Heard throw anything else?
No, other than what he told me when she threw a broken bottle and sliced his finger.
Sir, I'll sustain the objection. The jury will strike that that testimony. Please just answer the question asked, and when there's an objection, do not speak, okay?
As I said, the arguing, when it would continue, we would always, I'd put him in the car and we'd drive back to his West Hollywood address, at which point it just depended on the week or the day or the month. They would reconcile within hours, or it might take a day where he would stay overnight at his West Hollywood address, and then, I would take him back the next day, and, they would reconcile by, talking. And
we are hearing more evidence and detailed evidence, because he would have been with them often, of just how volatile their relationship was. I don't know if I showed this, but he said that in the beginning of the relationship, they were very lovey-dovey. Like he said, like they were high school sweethearts, and then pretty quickly the conflict began, and then it just got worse and worse and worse and more frequent and more intense. And it sounds like it was very frequent over a long period of time.
She would have, candles lit, or, a bottle of wine open with glasses, and, within, certain evenings, I'd get a text message from her, asking me to go pick up dinner at local restaurants they frequented.
Did you ever see any violence between Ms. Heard and Mr. Depp?
No.
Other than the occasion when you saw Ms. Heard throw something plastic in Mr. Depp's direction, did you ever see Ms. Heard hit Mr. Depp?
No.
Okay, so he would have been there often, but he also told a story in which he heard them fighting, but they were behind a door, and so he probably didn't witness them all the time. As a security person, I'm guessing he would post up outside. It sounded like that would happen sometimes, and he wasn't just in the room with them all the time. But he, according to him, which is interesting, he never witnessed any violence other than her throwing things at Johnny Depp.
On the occasions that you witnessed Ms. Heard and Mr. Depp argue, after that, did you ever see any physical injuries on Ms. Heard?
That's the same question.
Okay.
All right.
Move on.
Okay.
At any point during Ms. Heard's and Mr. Depp's relationship, did you ever see any injuries on Ms. Heard?
No.
He's saying he never saw any injuries on Amber Heard. What does that mean? I don't know. She could have been wearing makeup, as she claims, but, it's a data point.
When did you observe injuries on Mr. Depp?
The first time would have been around 2014, I guess, in which he had his finger was damaged from an incident in Australia.
Okay, so he's saying that, I think he's implying there were multiple instances of him seeing injuries on Johnny Depp that he believed were as a result of Amber Heard's violence against him.
I saw another injury around, would have been March of 2015. He had a swollen kind of cheekbone eyelid.
Okay, so an injury to his face in 2015, and I'm guessing we're going to get more details on that.
Well, we needed it as evidence in case Ms. Heard tried to make allegations towards Mr. Depp. I was emphatic with him, telling him that's a serious mark and we need to photograph it.
Okay, we're hearing that he observed a mark on his face that was serious, and he advised Johnny Depp to take a picture of it to protect Johnny Depp legally. So at his suggestion, Johnny Depp decided, okay, let's take a picture of the bruise on my face.
And when did you take this photograph?
It would have been around March of 2015.
There's a bruise. I can't tell. I'm not a physician or a forensic photo evaluator, so if I saw that, honestly, no offense to Johnny Depp, but I would think that was a zit or something, because I'm just more used to seeing zits. Or my recent injury from going to the dermatologist, which, looks pretty good at this point. According to Johnny Depp, he's saying that this was as a result of Amber Heard. And yeah, if you got hit that hard to produce a wound like that, that's significant. It's not like a push or a minor slap, right?
Later in time, did you ever notice any other injuries on Mr. Depp?
I did. It was around December of that same year, 2015. he got into an argument with Miss Heard and she scratched him and he had injuries.
Objection, Your Honor.
Sustain the objection, only your observation, sir, what you saw.
Yeah.
All right, thank you.
Okay, well, we heard what he was going to say. There was an objection, but he's saying that Johnny had reported to him that Amber, during a fight, had scratched him across his face, and he observed those wounds, which, yeah, wow. I mean, there's so many accounts now. Who knows? They could all be lies, right? But if they're all true, or even half of them are true, I mean, it's pretty horrific to imagine. I will remind everyone out there that there is a thing called bidirectional or mutual intimate partner violence. Contrary to what people say in the internet, it's a well-researched topic and phenomenon within the clinical literature and within intimate partner violence treatment experts. We always want to be careful, though, whenever we're identifying a couple as engaging in bidirectional abuse, because we could very easily inadvertently label the victim as the abusive person, when in fact they are defending themselves and trying or having a freak out occasionally because of the trauma of having been abused by the abuser. So whenever I assess people like this, I am very, very careful to rule out the possibility of that happening before I would ever conceptualize them and particularly tell them that I am labeling them as a bidirectional abusive couple or mutual abuse, or sometimes referred to as co-abuse. People say that. It is a thing. So could Amber Heard have been abusive and Johnny Depp have been abusive? Sure. And I think at this point, and I'm pretty sure we're going to see more evidence along these lines, that there's no hard, and some legal people are telling me this, that when they're trying to determine if someone is abusive during a criminal hearing, then there's this very strict guideline that the jury is supposed to follow. But this is not a criminal hearing, and so it's much looser in terms of what the word abuse means. And I think the way that it's playing out is the jury is being asked, did Amber Heard have enough reason to believe that the word abuse fit in terms of her writing that article for the Washington Post? Would a reasonable person reasonably conclude that they were abused under that relationship? And thus, the defamation case would not be granted, or whatever word you use in the legal world. By the way, I just got another email from another lawyer telling me more information about things, which is good. I welcome that. We have attorney Craig and we have attorney Allison and some others, I'm pretty sure. These people know a lot about this. They're not just lawyers, they're attorneys who work in court. Some of the lawyers reaching out to me actually have worked with some of the lawyers in this room, and so they're maybe at that level sort of a thing. And by the way, along those lines, another thing that attorney Craig was telling me is that the Amber Heard team is being criticized online as being a bunch of bumbling fools, when in fact, according to attorney Craig's opinion, they're a very good, competent team of lawyers that are actually doing a really great job and are highly respected. In fact, one of the attorneys for Amber Heard, maybe the lead counsel, was someone who actually argued in the United States Supreme Court, meaning that if you can claim as an attorney that you argued in the United States Supreme Court, then you're like a superstar in the law world. And so I don't know, but according to someone that I really would believe in terms of their opinion, the Amber Heard legal team is actually doing a really great job. And if you're biased against Amber Heard, then everything that they object to and everything that they bring up, you're probably just going to see it through that lens as if they're just a bunch of bumbling fools, or vice versa. Getting back to some other lawyers telling me, because I've been probing, I've been like, so what if this happens? Well, Johnny Depp would then, what are we looking at here? Because if you just watch this casually without understanding the landscape, you could conclude that Johnny Depp won. But there's a very specific question here, posed to the jury. And the other way that the jury could see it is that, okay, fine, yes, a reasonable person could conclude that Johnny Depp was abusive, at least verbally, and wasn't lying when they wrote in the Washington Post that Johnny Depp had abused her, but she did not provide the full picture of the relationship, and thus that is defamation. Even though she wasn't lying, she was lying by omission, by not having a serious caveat to her claim of being a victim by saying, I was also abusive, because that would round out the picture a lot, right?
That he once again had injuries sustained in an altercation.
Okay, so there are some more photographs taken by the security person.
There's a laceration on the left side of his nose.
Oh, okay, yeah, I thought that's the only sort of mark that I could see. So according to him, there's a laceration on his nose. Oh, okay.
It looks like the left upper cheek has a slight bruise to it.
Right. I see that now. Yeah, I thought it was a shadow at first, but okay. It's kind of a bad angle. It seems like if you're you'd want to get in closer on those regions.
Almost to the center, it looks like there's a red scratch mark above his left eye and to the right. Okay, page 2, I see a scratch mark, a vertical scratch mark adjacent to his right ear.
All right, this is, I think, a different incident. I'm not sure. And the scratch mark coming down from where his sideburns would be. Okay.
Page 3, there's a scratch mark on the lower right portion of his chin. There's that same scratch mark on the center left side of his nose.
All right, more scratches on his face. I'm not sure if this is all the same incident.
Did you ever see any similar injuries on Miss Heard?
None.
Did you ever see any injuries on Miss Heard?
I didn't.
Did Miss Heard ever tell you she was being abused by Mr. Depp?
She didn't.
Did she ever ask you for help?
No.
All right, that's interesting. So on one hand, you could conclude from that Amber Heard wasn't being abused, because if there's a security guard that is nearby and she was being abused, you could imagine someone reaching out to him and saying, especially with the extent the abuse that I believe Amber Heard is claiming, and the fact that he never saw her being abused, he never heard her claim that she was being abused, and she never reached out to him for any help. Okay, on the other hand, I'm pretty sure this is Johnny Depp's employee and not Amber Heard's, and I'm pretty sure he's very loyal to Johnny Depp, and not only as an employer, but maybe as a friend on some level. I don't know that, of course, but, so just hypothetically, let's say if that were the case, then we could imagine Amber Heard not wanting to reach out to him because she would not believe, either falsely or correctly, that he wouldn't support her, wouldn't be on her side. So I guess the jury just has to make a call as to which one that is. The other thing I'll say is that if you're being abused significantly, then you often don't tell anyone about it, even people that are right next to you. So it could be that too.
Her hands would have been in this motion once Mr. Judge and I rounded that corner and she saw both Jerry and I. She had this look of surprise on her face, and then she looked at Mr. Depp and us, and she shouted out loud, "This is the last time you do this to me." At which point Mr. Depp looked at her and said, "What the hell are you talking about?"
Okay, so he is recalling an event that he came around the corner. He heard them fighting and screaming. He heard a commotion. He came around the corner and he saw the two of them together. Amber Heard saw the security guard, and I think what he's implying is that she said, "Oh, crap, I have to act like I'm being abused," and then said, "This is the last time you're going to do that to me." And then Johnny Depp says, "What are you talking about? I didn't do anything to you." Okay, who knows? I mean, he's inferring what he thought was going through her mind, but could that happen? Yeah, and I'm guessing a lot of people watching would say absolutely, because she's a liar and all that kind of stuff. And so let's entertain that idea. I mean, my goodness, to abuse someone and then to have a pretty sophisticated reaction very quickly of like, okay, what do I say that will deflect any kind of blame or responsibility? In fact, what do I say to make it look like Johnny Depp is the actual abuser? That's a big time yikes with that. Now, it's also possible that she was being abused in addition to abusing him, or being abused and she was defending herself. But I'm guessing we're going to hear a little bit more detail here.
At that point, Mr. Judge tapped Mr. Depp on the arm and told him, "Boss, let's leave." So we gathered, there was a couple of computer bags that was right on a table, and we exited the front door to penthouse number 3.
Did you have a clear view of Ms. Heard?
I did.
Did you have a clear view of her face?
I did.
Did you observe any injuries on Ms. Heard's face?
I didn't.
Did you see any redness?
I didn't.
Okay, so the lawyer's asking, in this instance, in this conflict, did you see any evidence that Amber Heard had any wounds on her face? And he is saying he did not see that.
So then, Mr. Bett, you texted Mr. Depp back 2 minutes later, and you said, "I prevented them from calling Popo. Glad you had fun. You mean dinner in room or restaurant?" Do you see that?
I do.
And you sent that text to Mr. Depp, correct?
I did.
And by Popo, you mean police, correct?
That's correct.
Okay. You told him that you were glad he had fun, right?
Right.
All right, so cross-examination of the security person. They're trying to make a case, I think, to the jury that he is protective of Johnny Depp and thus his testimony is questionable. And they're bringing up a situation in which Johnny Depp and his friends were drinking heavily. And it's interesting to think about how much of our lives are documented in text form or in pictures. And because I guess they had full access to Johnny Depp's phone and all of his text messages, and they just went through everything. And I don't know that, but there's a text exchange between Johnny Depp and his security person, and Johnny Depp saying, we drank a lot of booze, and then the security guy says, I prevented the police from being called, something along those lines. Okay, so what does that mean? Does that mean that his testimony is questionable? I don't know.
Physical altercation did you observe between Mr. Depp and Ms. Heard once you'd gone back to your seat?
I've never seen Johnny be violent towards anybody.
All right, so they're talking with one of Johnny Depp's friends who was on the plane in which Amber Heard, I believe, claims there was abuse from Johnny Depp. He was there, and he's saying, not only did I not see any abuse happening in that plane, but I've never seen him be violent with anyone. All right. We also heard him say, I didn't show this, that he went up to Amber Heard. Amber Heard seemed upset. Johnny Depp and him and a couple other people got onto the plane. Amber Heard was already on the plane. She seemed upset already at Johnny before anything happened. He goes over to Amber Heard and says, Johnny Depp loves you. And then all of a sudden she exploded and said, how dare you talk to me? So, I don't know, I'm trying to piece together what I would have seen based on his description. All right, well, that does it for that episode. Everyone out there, please take care of yourself because you deserve it. You really, really do.